Love it. Okay, take it away.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, boy, I'm looking at this group. I kind of checked you guys out and saw some of your previous videos on YouTube, and pretty impressive group and pretty impressive speakers. I recognize a lot of the names out there. We've got Jim, W6LG, who does some really cool video work of his own. Frank, of course, is a well-known ham and sometimes troublemaker, so we'll have to keep an eye on.
I would have positioned that exactly the same way.
So we're going to talk about Mountaintop Operating with VHF. And this is a picture of me on Mount Sneffels. It's a 14,000-foot mountain in the western part of Colorado. And as you can see there, I'm operating probably 2 meters with the little arrow, dual band arrow antenna, vertical polarization on 2. So who am I? I was first licensed in 1977. I was walking across the Purdue campus, go Boilers, and they advertised a ham radio class. And I said, I've always wanted to do that. So I did it, got licensed. My technical background is electrical engineering, and I've worked in electronic test and measurement for many decades. Kind of retired now. I still do a little bit of consulting. And my ham radio interests always, I do a lot of things actually, but it always seems to come back to this confluence of VHF, mountains, getting up in the mountains, exploring, hiking, driving the Jeep, whatever it takes. And so that's what I'm really talking about today. For summits on the air, I've done over 250 SOTA activations in 23 states. And I like to write stuff. So over on the right side, you do see my book there. My last name does have 2 syllables, Bob Witte. I forgot to mention that to Rod because we're always talking over email and we see each other's names. We don't necessarily do that. Anyway, make sure you buy lots of copies of my book. It'll really help my retirement picture. I'm just kidding. Honestly, it's really aimed towards VHF and outdoors. And if you like that kind of stuff, you'll probably like the book. Let's see. Oh, and then I will pull some information out of the book. You'll kind of see that as we go here, but I also have other material to talk about today. And I should put a disclaimer out. I'm pretty sloppy about terminology sometimes. When I say VHF, I probably just mean anything above 50 megahertz. And so what I want to talk about today is some VHF basics. I've actually trimmed that down quite a bit for this crowd. I think you guys are pretty aware of the basics. And then we'll talk about contesting and then summits on the air, and then how SOTA and VHF contests can work together. So here's kind of a review. What are we talking about with VHF? Here's the real definition, right? 30 to 300 megahertz. And then, of course, UHF 300 on up to 3,000. And the ham bands over on the right here. The 3 most popular bands are 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. And I will talk a little bit about 23 centimeters. That's 1.2 gig. I've been doing a little bit of operating there lately. A lot of people enter the VHF world with their HT, often, very flexible piece of radio equipment, often maligned and disparaged, but I think, most hams probably have one because they're so useful, affordable, compact, ham shack in your hand. Typically, we're going to cover 2 meters and 70 centimeters with that, low power. The big thing, and I'll be talking about some antenna options here. Best ways to improve your HT is antenna. The rubber duck antenna is convenient, compact, and crummy. Also, so we'll be talking a little bit about single sideband, CW, some of the other modes. So I wanted to highlight this briefly. If you go out and say, I want to buy an off-the-shelf, really good VHF, UHF transceiver, there are not a lot of choices out there. Back in the olden days, you could buy, like from Kenwood or ICOM, they'd have like these single band mobile size transceivers that would do all mode on 2 meters or 70 centimeters or whatever. That's all pretty much disappeared. The only serious one is VHF, UHF transceivers, the IC 9700. And I have one of these. It's a really nice radio, not real cheap, about $1,500 last time I looked. And it does 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 23 centimeters. There's other ways to get on all modes for VHF and up. One way are these do everything transceivers, HF through UHF, like the FT991A does that. There's also the ICOM IC7100. Yaesu's got an older FT857. I think they stopped making that though, but you'll find those kind of radios out there, and they're another way to get on something besides FM on VHF and UHF. And there's a pretty good collection of QRP transceivers. Again, HF through UHF typically. So like the Yaesu FT817. Well, here's the 818. It's an upgrade of the 817. That's been around a long time, and I've got one of the 817s I use. More recently is the ICOM IC705. A lot of excitement in the QRP community and in the SOTA community with that. Elecraft has a really strong following, of course, and good radios, KX3, and you can get a 2 meter option for that, but not 70 centimeters. One thing I've been writing about in my blog and then in the book is this myth of VHF line of sight. I run into this a lot. People are like, well, I've got my VHF radio, and of course, it can only go so far because it's line of sight. And that's what we teach in our technician license classes. And, you know, it's probably not a bad thing to teach. It's certainly very different than HF. Usually we talk about the line of sight model is you've got an optical horizon, and then the radio horizon goes a little further. Rule of thumb is like 15% or something like that. But really, the signals don't stop there, right? They keep on going. And so this model I use is, I call it line of sight and then non-line of sight. Keeps it pretty simple, but the idea is there are signals that go further, and the thing is they're weaker, right? They're attenuated when they get out here, but they're still usable, and that's why you run into these cases. Like I talked to a guy on SOTA just a few days ago, and he was like, I can't believe I'm talking to you because there's this big mountain range right in the way, and I'm just blasting right into it. And it's like, yeah, it's, sometimes the signal keeps on going. In fact, here's a look at kind of the mountaintop effect. Is again, you kind of have this line of sight region where the signals are really strong, but they'll keep going, and they might reflect, refract, diffract, who knows what they're doing, and you get some signal into the non-line of sight region. So I've been emphasizing that with people, trying to get them to think a little broader. And we do get skywave propagation. And the two main effects there, sporadic E, mostly seasonal during the summer, pretty often on 6 meters, sometimes on 2 meters. And then we may have some F layer propagation, right? We might actually get enough sunspots up there to get F layer propagation on 6, and that is just a blast. And I'm not going to go too deep into the propagation stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of, I'd call them exotic propagation modes, right? Aurora, meteor scatter, EME. There's other ways to pursue long distance on VHF and UHF. Okay, so let's take a look at VHF contests. The first thing I always talk to people about with VHF contests is, to me, they're not really contests, they're activity weekends. One of the problems with single sideband, CW, et cetera, on like 2 meters, is you fire up the radio, and unless you're in a heavily populated area, you'll probably turn the radio on, make a call, and you'll hear nothing because there isn't always enough activity there. But that all changes on VHF contest weekend. And so it's an opportunity to get on and use some of those non-FM modes. The scoring's based on the Maidenhead grid system. Most contest activities on single sideband, CW, some CW, there'll be FM and FT8. In fact, FT8 is growing so fast that particularly on 6 meters, it's become kind of controversial that, hey, is FT8 ruining the VHF contest? And similar to some of the discussions on HF, right? But certainly a popular mode, and FT4 to some extent. So in the contest format is you use all the ham bands above 50 megahertz. Again, the 3 most popular ones there. And you work every one you can on every band. So each band is an additional contact. And then roughly speaking, your score ends up being the QSO points. You generally get higher point value for higher frequency because we consider those harder contacts to make. And then that gets multiplied by total grids worked per band. So every band counts as a new grid. So the idea is make lots of contacts and work lots of grids for a high score. The contest calendar, these are the major contests, definitely a North America bias. ARL has the January contest, the June contest, and then September. And then CQ has the CQ Worldwide VHF contest, which is in July. It's a little unique in that it is 6 meters and 2 meters only. You don't use the other bands for that one. I think everybody considers June as the big VHF contest. The warm weather allows people to get out and do mountain topping and portable operation pretty easily. And we almost always have some kind of sporadic E propagation on 6 meters. So it's certainly my focus for the year. June is the big event. I mentioned the Maidenhead grid system. You got to know your grid locator. So the world's divided up into these big rectangles. And for example, I'm sitting in Colorado, so I'm in the Delta Mike rectangle there. I try really hard not to say grid square. It turns out these things are not square. So it's really a grid locator. And so inside, then if you drill into Colorado as an example, here are the grids, the 4-digit or the 4-character grids that cover Colorado. So I'm sitting here in DM79, kind of on the south end of that. That covers all of Denver and up into the line goes right through Boulder. And then to the north is Delta November 70, so that's Fort Collins and such. And down south is DM78 is Colorado Springs. And then off to the right, we have like DM89, 88, 87. I call those the cow grids because there's basically no VHF operators out there, but there's a lot of cows. It's rangeland that it looks more like Kansas than Colorado. But we do have guys that rove and go out there and activate those grids. And so that's why we love our rovers in Colorado. Here's a picture of my friend Stu, W0STU on Mount Herman. Mount Herman is sort of in our backyard here at just over 9,000 feet. And a few years ago, he drug some equipment up there and did a VHF contest effort in January using fairly low power. And then this picture is my setup on Mount Evans. Mount Evans has a road that goes almost to the top. It's a 14,000 foot mountain. And I had this SUV set up with a mast on the hitch. And, you know, it's the CQ contest. So it's just 6 meters and 2 meters. So you see the 2 Yagis there. That was lots of fun. mentioned rover stations are unique in VHF contests. You get to move from grid to grid. And so when you move to a new grid, you get to start over in terms of who you work. You can work everybody again. So you can accumulate more QSOs that way. Here's a shot of Eric, KR0VER. Now there's a good call sign for a rover. You see his rover setup on the left there. This is pretty typical, some kind of mast attached to a vehicle, and he's got a bunch of Yagis stacked up there. And if you look carefully, there's some kind of loop or halo antenna for 6 meters. And I don't see a rotor on this. Sometimes guys go ahead and install a rotor as well, so they can actually turn the antennas pretty easily. And then he had published for a contest a few years ago, he had published his route. And you can see what rovers like to do. They like to spend time near the where 4 grids come together, so you can quickly loop around and hit those 4 grids, and then zip on down to another corner and hit those, etc. And he's activating those cow grids for us, right? So DN80, DM89, etc. And I say I'm a recovering rover. I used to do this a lot, and man, it's a lot of work to get out there and activate all those different grids. So that's a little bit about VHF contests. And so let's take a look at Summits on the Air, or SOTA. And SOTA is a worldwide program. It started in the UK. A bunch of really wise people put it together in a way that it could be expanded worldwide and sort of customized to each location. So for it to come to the US, pretty much in the US, every state has its own SOTA association and has rules in terms of scoring and such designed for that state. You can imagine that like the scoring is always based on elevation. So you can imagine like Colorado has different requirements or different scoring algorithm than say Georgia. You know, the elevations are a lot lower there. There's 2 ways to participate. You can be an activator, which means you're the person on the summit making contacts, or you can be a chaser, and so you're working the various summits. There's a pretty in-depth points and award system. You know, we could probably spend an hour just talking about that. I guess the big thing is that it's each activation or each chase, it lets you accumulate points, and then and the points are based on the elevation of the summit, and then you accumulate those points, and there's all kinds of awards. It's really pretty cool. Couple of details about SOTA. There are a few requirements that are important. It's not just any summit, right? There's a specific list of summits that count for SOTA, and these are based on the geography of the and the topography of the topography of the terrain. And roughly speaking, it has to be a unique summit that sticks up, let's see, 150 meters, or I think of it as 500 feet. And so its prominence is the technical term, has to be at least 500 feet, but you can just think of it as it has to stick up and be unique. And so two summits really close together might, maybe only one, maybe both of them are on the list, but maybe only one is, depending on how the topography actually works out. The equipment must be carried. In fact, the term the rules use is non-motorized ascent, and so the idea is you're not just driving to a summit and operating from your car. And so the rule they put in is basically carry the equipment And so you can actually drive to the summit, take all your gear, stick it in a backpack, walk some minimum distance, some distance away. No minimum is specified, but the rules do specify you cannot be attached to the vehicle. Your antenna or station is not supported by a vehicle, and you can't get power from the vehicle. So portable power is required. Specifically excludes fossil fuel generators, which pretty much means it's going to be battery power, right? And people may use solar panels to supplement that, but there's probably a battery in the system. And then there's lots more rules and such. If you want to get involved, you probably need to spend a little time reading through there, but that's kind of the quick summary. So this is another geography test here. This is all the SOTA summits in the U.S. I guess I chopped off Canada. Sorry about that. And it's kind of what you'd expect, right? You'd say, okay, you got the East Coast mountains that run, Alabama up to Maine. Lots of SOTA summits in there, and then you got the West Coast, Washington, down through California, and then of course you got the Rocky Mountains, so that quite a bit in Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and you might think, well, that's all there is, but really, if you start looking, most states have at least one or two SOTA summits. So like Texas is pretty sparse, right? There's a few spread out, and there's the Guadalupe Mountains to the west. Arkansas actually has quite a few. And then you go, where are there not any summits? Well, Kansas does not have any. It's just too flat. Florida and Louisiana, I think that's it. Iowa there's only one dot there. I think there's actually two summits. So, and then like Wisconsin, Michigan actually have quite a few. So if you're kind of in that flatland state, you might be surprised that there are actually some summits within driving range. This talk is about VHF, UHF. That's what I'm focused on. I need to point out that most of the SOTA activity is actually on HF, right? It's kind of your classic QRP operating, small radio, often on CW, right? Throw up some kind of wire antenna. And so if you start talking to people about SOTA, you're going to run into that a lot. And so I wondered, well, how popular is this? So I pulled the data off of the SOTA database, because all the contacts get logged in a master database. 80% of the SOTA QSOs are below 50 megahertz, which leaves 20% above. And then if you drill into above 50 megahertz, you find 2 meter FM is the dominant band and mode. Probably not a real surprise, but I did want to dig in and see if the data supported that, right? And so you got 90% of the QSOs above 50 are on 2 meters, and 85% of those are FM, 85% of the above 50 megahertz. Okay, so I'm going to talk about VHF SOTA. So how do you do a VHF SOTA activation? Well, to keep going here, it's basically take along a 2 meter handheld on a hike. It's about that simple. And that's me operating on Kaufman Ridge. I put the SOTA designator there. W0C means, okay, we're in the W0 call area, and C means Colorado. So that means the Colorado SOTA Association. And then the SP081 is the specific summit. Each summit has a designator. It was 10,765 feet, and just went out there and made made contacts on 2 meter FM. You know, call on 146.52 is typically what we do. One thing I do encourage folks is really get something besides the rubber duck antenna. They're really not that good. And one of my favorites is the half-wave vertical. Here we're showing the MFJ 1714. On the left, it's extended, and on the right, it's collapsed. These things come in flavors of SMA and BNC connectors, so you can find one that matches your radio, and they work really well. I mean, it's that whole thing of it's a half wave, it's fed from the end, so it's got a little matching network there. But you get just like on HF, if you get a decent half wave radiator up in the air, they actually work pretty well. And then a few years back, I discovered this RH770, which is a dual band version of this. It's got a little, it's got the magic lump in the middle of the 2 meter half wave that makes it work on 70 centimeter. And again, SMA and BNC connectors are available, and that thing is $17 delivered to your door. And they actually work pretty well. So that's kind of my default antenna for 2 meters and 70 centimeters. A lot of guys like these roll-up J-pole antennas. They're about 54 inches long. You know, they're made out of like twin lead or ladder line or whatever. And you can hang it in a tree, or if you're above tree line, take along like a lightweight collapsible fishing pole and hang it that way. And it's a half wave radiator and has a quarter wave matching section. So again, get a half wave radiator working in it. It does pretty well. So here's what I call the improved VHF SOTA activation. So I'm still using the handheld radio, but I've got a small Yagi for 2 meters. And my favorite are these Aero antenna Yagis. They collapse down pretty nicely. They screw together quite quickly. And then that boom is, I don't know, what is that? 3 or 4 feet long, I guess 4 feet. It's a split boom design, so it comes apart in the center. So it collapses down and goes in my pack pretty nicely. It has about 6 dB of gain relative to a dipole. That's been measured by the Central States VHF guys multiple times. So you add 6 dB over that half wave antenna I showed previously. And then the other thing I've been doing is I noticed that I'd be out on some summit and I'm hearing the other station really well, and they're not hearing me. They're giving me poor signal reports. Oh, you're right at the noise level. And I'm going, what? No, why is that? Well, it's because the other guy is probably running a 50-watt mobile, either in his car or at home or whatever, and I'm running a 5-watt HT. So I said, okay, I gotta do something about that. And so yeah, always improve the antenna first, right? Because that'll help you on transmit and receive. But then increase your transmit power. It gives you more punch for that. That's a technical term for that non-line of sight region. And the radio I've been using is this Yaesu FT90. It's very compact. Unfortunately, no longer made. In fact, I wish Yaesu would bring something back similar to it, because it's really small. That thing will put out 50 watts, and so I'll take that and a small. I'll show you the battery in a second. Lithium battery, and it does really, really well. It also has a better receiver in terms of selectivity than your typical HT. And so that's kind of turned into my go-to radio. There are some Chinese radios that are kind of small, mini mobile radios. They can be used too. The receivers are, let's say, they're not that robust. Is probably a nice way to say that. And here's, oh, I got this out of order. Let's go here. So here's the battery. Bioenno makes some really good batteries. This happens to be the 4.5 amp hour lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, or just LiFePO. And here's some, if you like specs, here's a bunch of specs. The key issue, it'll put out like 9 amps of current. With that 50 watt radio, I usually back it off to like 25 watts. I'm usually not running full power to save batteries and such. And this little battery only weighs 1 pound. So these are very popular with the SOTA crowd. So while we're looking at radios, I mentioned the FT90. Here's the FT817, right? So here's an example of wanting to operate CW and single sideband. And so I'll take the FT817 along. I went up on Mount Herman, and during the January VHF contest again. And if you look at that picture, there's really not much snow around. We can, depending on the year, we can have some really nice weather in January, or we can have really bad blizzards. So got on 2 meter and 70 centimeter for that contest, did 17 QSOs in about an hour. And my best contact was up into Wyoming, about 140 miles. Again, using that three element Yagi. Here's another example of operating. There is a dormant volcano called the Capulin mountain down in northeastern New Mexico. And here's I didn't take this picture, I pulled this off the web, but you can definitely see the crater, and there's a road that kind of spirals around up to the edge of the crater, and then you hike to the summit. And I thought, I want to activate that thing for SOTA. Unfortunately, it is out in the middle of nowhere. It is a national monument. It's about 8,100, almost 8,200 feet tall, but it's like 150 miles to any population area. So that'd be like Colorado Springs or Albuquerque, Santa Fe. There's just not much out there. And so I thought, if I just try 2 meter FM, that's probably not going to work. There's just not enough stations out there. In the middle of summer, you might get lucky and have enough mobiles, driving across New Mexico. You might be able to make contacts that way. So, but this was in springtime. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? I put out the word to kind of the serious weak signal VHF community in southern Colorado and down into New Mexico. And those guys got on the air for me. And I worked a bunch of them, worked up into Denver, Colorado Springs, down into Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And my best contact that day was with N7KA, just outside of Albuquerque. And we calculated that as 184 miles. I initially heard him on single sideband. And of course, I'm not sure what he's running, probably at least 100 watts, right? He may have had an amplifier and to get more. And so I'm sitting there with my little 5 watt FT817, and he can't hear me on sideband. So what do? Like VHF contesters often do. If you can't quite work them on sideband, you just flip over to CW and complete the contact. And that's what we did. He heard me well on CW. Here's another case here. This is on top of Threemile Mountain. Again, it's the January VHF contest. Here you do see some snow on the ground, but it was a pretty nice day. Blue skies, lots of sun, about 10,000 feet. And I was sitting there working a bunch of stations. Actually, if you look carefully, that is an FT991. And that is a pretty hefty well, not a huge battery, but it's a bigger battery to give me more power there. And because this summit was not that difficult to hike, I kind of loaded my pack with a lot of stuff and drug it up the summit. And so I'm sitting there working, guys, and then all of a sudden I hear Larry N0LL calling me on 2-meter sideband. And I was kind of surprised. He's a well-known station in Kansas, and I often working during VHF contests, but not this far west. And so let's see, here's the map. So here's me on Threemile Mountain and Larry over in Kansas. And it turns out that was, and we completed on sideband. We didn't have to do CW, 372 miles. So that is my best 2-meter SOTA contact so far. So I'm kind of proud of that. You notice one thing, I never talk about tropo ducting and kind of the tropo enhancement. We don't get a lot of that in Colorado. It's too dry. So we don't experience the the band openings where the tropo ducting takes you 600 miles or whatever. So this was pretty good. Okay, what about going higher in frequency? So for whatever reason, I started thinking about what about 1.2 gigahertz? The guys down in the SOTA guys down in Arizona, I know, are doing quite a bit on 1.2. And so I thought about let's do that and let's give that a try. It is considered a microwave band for SOTA. And so one of the things they do up at those frequencies, they start having awards based on distance. So it's not just number of contacts, but how far the distance between stations is. So I thought, okay, that'd be a fun challenge. And so how do you get on 1.2 gig? Well, the cheapest way I found was this Alinco HT, the DJ G7T handheld transceiver. It's 3 bands and it's $240. And it puts out 1 watt on 23 centimeters. So not real powerful, but it got us on the air. And then I coupled that with the antenna I'm holding there is a Comet antenna. It's 16 elements, 16.6 dBi gain. Really nice antenna. Honestly, it's kind of long for backpacking. It's like 5.5 feet long, but I'll strap it on my pack. And the only issue is it tends to bash into tree limbs and stuff if you're in a wooded area. But and I've found that a lot of SOTA guys have gone this route if they're trying to get a 1.2 gig of this by the Alinco HT. And then later I decided I wanted more power. Again, it's always about power, right? And so I actually found this Kenwood single band radio, kind of old. It hasn't been made in many years. You guys probably remember where you used to go out. You could buy, like that particular model radio, you could buy a 2-meter version, you could buy a 70 centimeter version, and they had a 1.2 gig version. So I got one of those. It's a little bit big, but again, for some summits, I can carry that. And then I do have a smaller Yagi I can use. This is purchased off of eBay. There's actually quite a few out there. They're made in China. The quality is not very good, but I did get one of those. It's about $25, so it's a lot more affordable. And then an interesting antenna I have is this one from WA5 VJB. It's a PC board antenna. Pretty clever design there. You can see he's got a couple of elements laid down on that PC board. And I'll use that sometimes as well if I really want to be compact. So last weekend we had the Colorado 14er event. So it's really a SOTA event. You can be on any SOTA summit, but a lot of the guys like to go out and get onto the 14,000 foot mountains. And David, W0ADV, was down on, actually he was on Red Cloud and Sunshine Peak, activating those. And I was on Mount Evans, and we just barely completed a contact on to Sun when he was on Sunshine on 1.2 gig, and that turned out to be 152 miles. So that's now my best effort on 1.2 gig, and that's with FM. So I'm not sure how much further we can go using FM, but we at least made that contact because it was pretty sparse, pretty weak signal. So here's David's end. He's got the same Comet antenna, and he was looking around for the best place to point, and it turned out this notch seemed to be the best spot. So he aimed at that, and so apparently this first ridge was maybe blocking us a little bit, because when he went, this was on Sunshine, when he went over to Red Cloud, he actually had a much stronger signal because this little ridge wasn't in the way. So that was pretty cool. He's standing. You can see David holding the antenna there. And then, so yeah, I did want to talk about FM. I mean, I'm sure at least some of you guys are sitting there going, what are these guys using FM for, man? Don't they know signal sideband or CW would be better? And yeah, it's well known, right? FM is poor at weak signal levels. So why is there all this FM activity? And I think it just goes back to the dual band FM HT is almost universal. It's affordable, compact, portable. You know, I often say the 2 meter FM is the utility mode, right? We use it for all kinds of stuff because it's just nice and flexible. And so most of the SOTA guys will just throw an HT in. In fact, they might be HF oriented, right? They may really be going out to do HF contests, but they might say, oh yeah, I'll take the HT along. And that mentality is kind of carried over to the 1.2 gigahertz, that the Elinco HT is a very affordable way to get on 23 centimeters. I have looked at some of the transverters and such that are out there, and you know, I may end up with one of those someday. But the other thing going on is I do use SSB and CW, but I really need to know that there's going to be compatible stations on the air, and it pretty much turns into two cases. VHF contests will have that kind of activity, so that's good. Or I pretty much have to make a sched with somebody, make sure they're going to be there. And then I will mention the WSJT. I think there are some guys on HF using that for SOTA. I don't think I don't know of much VHF, but that's unexplored, I'd say, and maybe that's in our future as well. And the question will be, what is the compact and convenient gear that can do that? Because a lot of times you get on the mountains, the wind is high, the weather is not perfect, and you want very simple radios that you can make contacts with quickly. You don't want to be screwing around with a lot of buttons and knobs and cables and computers and stuff like that. So we'll see where that goes. Okay, I'll wrap it up with a few pretty pictures. Here's my wife Joyce and I on Spinny Mountain. She pretty much goes with me on every activation, and we kind of tag team it here. Here I'm playing the role of antenna mast and human rotator, and she's actually on the air talking to somebody. Look carefully, she's got the logging clipboard in her hand, so she's writing down the log stuff, and we're taking turns there. There's David again on Mount Elbert. This isn't August, but there's still snow on the ground up there. That's me on Chief Mountain putting together the 2 meter Yagi. And again, my favorite 2 meter Yagi on South Peak. That's in the middle of the summer. Nice view. Here's our buddy Steve, WG0AT. And if you look behind Steve there, that's his pack goat, one of his pack goats that often accompanies him on SOTA. He's more of an HF operator, but he does get on 2 meters a lot, and I've worked him a lot on various summits. Another shot of Steve with a different pack goat coming in to inspect whatever he's doing there. My buddy Denny came out from Indiana to be on Pikes Peak with us one time. You can see it was really fogged in up there and pretty cold. He's working 70 centimeters. And again, Joyce on Pikes Peak with her big smile, working a bunch of stations up there. You can see the FT90 in the fanny pack in the lower right. And I'm probably holding the 2 meter Yagi for her. And then full disclosure, here's Steve and Guy I was on a 14,000 foot summit with one of the goats. The clouds moved and it was pretty miserable. They were getting rained on and all that. And so Steve pulls out his HT. He's trying to just make a few contacts and get the heck out of there. So that's it. Talked about VHF, UHF, talked about hiking, SOTA, getting on the air, a little bit of contesting, and having fun in the mountains.
Well, Bob, hey, thank you so much for the wonderful, colorful slides and educating us on this. If you've got some questions, please type them in the chat window or shout them out, and we can start taking questions from all you lovely people now.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thanks. What about feed lines where you're dealing with an antenna that's distant from the handheld or the transceiver? What do you do about that? Because you're on 23 centimeters, you're on 440, you're at really high frequencies. I said really high. You're at ultra high frequencies.
It's ultra high. Yeah, good question. Well, actually, we keep the feed lines pretty short. Like typically, if I'm hand holding the 2 meter antenna, it's going to be a RG8X, maybe 8 feet long, 6 to 8 feet long. And then the 1.2 gig, actually keep it even shorter. Usually that coax is maybe a couple feet long.
Why do you pick RG8X? Because it's flexible, inexpensive? Because there are other coaxes maybe have less loss that are also fairly small diameter.
Yeah, I'd be curious what you'd recommend there. Usually I go with 8X because if you calculate the loss for 6 or 8 feet, it's minimal, and it's pretty handy, right? It's flexible, it coils up really nice. On the 1.2 gig, I actually have I think it's about 3 feet long, and I use it's got end connectors on it, and it's one of the low loss VHF type, like a LMR 400, a flexible LMR 400 or similar, right? It's got the lower loss dielectric in there.
A couple of weeks ago in a video, I cut away now, are you buying the coax that has pre-molded connectors on it? Or
I often do, yeah.
Yeah, I cut away the rubber boot behind the coax connector. And if you have a chance to look at that video, it was so poorly put on, it was really bad.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. And also, I just strung together 50 coax connectors, and I'm going to use a nano, and I can't pick it up, it's too heavy. Nano VNA to measure, and what I'll do is I'll measure the loss as I go up in frequency. I'm kind of curious, but I might grab a piece of 8X and measure the loss at 23. I think I can get up that high with that nano VNA.
Yeah, no, I don't use 8X that high. I use, it's like it's RG8 size coax, but it's like 99. It's not 9913.
It's like an LMR 400 or.
Yeah, it's in that category. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it would be curious. I've I've probably gotten complacent on that. I think the places I'm buying the pre-assembled coax from are reliable folks, but maybe
if it's the gray stuff, I know the manufacturer and it's garbage.
Interesting. No, it's not gray.
If it's the black stuff, it's likely okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do warn people about buying random stuff on Amazon. There's a lot of cable out there pre-made,
Yeah.
and I'm sure some of it's good, but I just don't know that you can rely on it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Other thoughts?
Other questions?
Oh yeah, I have one more if you don't mind. I
And
was working.
Frank next.
Oh, Frank, you want to go ahead?
No, Jim, go ahead. Frank is next.
No, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I was working for the county as a building inspector, and I was driving down the road in Lake Tahoe, and I saw these UHF, VHF antennas on this guy's roof. I knocked on his door, and now he's in a bowl in Lake Tahoe, but he's able to get out from there and into the Sacramento Valley. And that just blew my mind at the time, because how does it get over the mountain? And you showed the picture. What's the mechanism for that? What causes it to get over the top of the hill? Because
Well, I think there are actually multiple things going on, right? Or could be going on. There's reflection. Like sometimes we reflect off of mountains and it kind of wanders around and finds a path. There's the whole knife edge diffraction thing, right? At the edge of the top of the summit. It can diffract.
That was how he explained it, by the way, was knife edge.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Is it? And so it actually does do that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I've kind of, well, it's not that I don't try and predict what's going to happen. But I try not to overthink it too much. It's kind of like, okay, is there a chance I can make a contact through some path, and I'll give it a try. And it's just, you never know how it's gonna play out.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Frank, over to you, sir.
Bob, thank you for coming today, and what a wonderful presentation. I think for hams who kind of default into being shack bound, I mean, everybody enjoys that, but I think the attraction of combining amateur radio with something else you like, and you clearly, are doing that, puts a facet onto the hobby that I think is very, very intriguing. A couple of observations. I quickly looked at the state I live in, Mississippi, and there's only one SOTA there. What's odd, it's at the second highest peak in the state. It's what's commonly called Little Mountain, and no one would really call it a mountain at all. It's in a state park. The highest summit is up in the northeast corner near a town called Corinth there. And so one of the things that I'm curious about is the different on-the-air groups like SOTA, the Islands, IOTA, and then more recently Parks, POTA. They don't really necessarily talk to one another, and it looks like SOTA has an automated system for reporting logging, and that seems to work well, just listening to you and a few other people. How would I go about getting the SOTA people, just emailing them about, hey, here's a higher summit in the state, and it would give you another point? My background's in GIS. I taught that for multiple decades. And so what would your advice be? Could I just email the SOTA group in the United Kingdom and say, hey, here's a higher point that's in this state? Is that something you could add?
Yeah, so a couple of comments. So what you'd want to do is find the association manager for your state. Each association has a local manager that lives in or nearby the region, and make that recommendation to them. I bet you're going to find out, this seems counterintuitive, but I bet you're going to find out that that summit actually doesn't have enough prominence associated with it. And because otherwise, why wouldn't the highest point in the state be a SOTA summit, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it goes like many things, as you well know more than most, how you define the measurement often, shapes that thing. And let me just segue this for those on the live group here and those who listen later. If you haven't read Bob's books on measurement, if you're workbench oriented, you're really missing out. He talks about measurement theory, and other than Joe Carr, Bob's books are the only ones that I've seen who cover formal measurement theory. I happen to teach that in the social sciences for several decades as a statistician, so I've learned an awful lot from Bob's books in test and measurement. So thank you again. You've been a virtual Elmer and a great acquaintance, Bob. Thank you for coming today.
Well, thanks, Frank. That's very kind of you. I'll send you the $20 later. I appreciate the plug. Let's see. Which state were you talking about?
I'm in Mississippi.
I'll look up who the association manager is and send it to you.
Thank you very much.
I'd say the SOTA program has a really good set of infrastructure. They've got a spotting page called SOTA Watch. They've got this huge database which knows about every summit and has data on every summit. And then it has the capability of, like if I go out and activate a summit, I'll often put notes in there. It's like, okay, this is easy to find. Blah blah blah, but watch out, you really can't get there from Highway 9. You have to take a left turn here or whatever, and give other people advice on activating it. If I write up a trip report, I'll go ahead and put a link to my trip report. Anyway, so that's all really good stuff. Let's see, and there's a number of mapping programs that know about SOTA peaks. And that is really good. So if you want to, in particular, the one I mentioned it on one of the slides or listed it. It's called it's SOTL.AS. So it's like SOTLAS, SOTA Atlas, SOTL.AS, and it is really flexible. You can just pull it up and zoom into any location you're interested in. It shows you all the SOTA summits. You can click on those, and then you can overlay filters. Like I only want to do summits I've never activated before, so it can show you those, all kinds of good stuff.
Great. Any other questions from the gang, please?
I'd just like to thank Bob for coming on. I'm over in the UK, and it's been very, very interesting hearing what you've been saying there. And just out of interest, test and measurement. I'm also, or have been, involved for years in test and measurement. By building, various documentation for UCAS, etc., and writing uncertainty budgets and such like. So, been quite an involvement on that side. That's unusual on the test and measurement side. But that's out of interest. Well, thank you very much for coming on. It's been very interesting.
Thank you, guys.
Well, folks, I'm going to wrap up the YouTube stream here. Bob, formally on behalf of Cycle 25 and Rod and myself, thanks so much for coming out and giving us a tremendous wealth of knowledge with your presentation this morning.